everyone, my name is Maria Escobar, and today me and my partner Teresa will be presenting on the phylum Onychophora. So, a little bit of an introduction to the phylum Onychophora. So, the first Onychophora was described in 1826 by Reverend Lanson Gilding. At the time, he thought it was some kind of like a slug with legs, but later studies place it into its own phylum, Onychophora, which are also known as the velvet worms. So, velvet worms belong to the superphylum Ecdysozoa, which is the same group that includes animals like insects. So there are around 180 known species, and they're all terrestrial, and they live in places like plant litter or soil. But it's very important to highlight that their ancestors were marine, which shows their adaptation over time. So velvet worms are often called living fossils because they have been around for around 500 million years and they have survived mass extinctions. Actually have a pretty simple body plan. They have bilateral symmetry. They're also triploblastic, which means that they have the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. They also have a complete gut. Their bodies are around 5 millimeters, 15 centimeters long. Some velvet worms are dark, like gray or brown, which allows them to blend into their environment and hide from the danger. But on the other hand, there's some velvet worms who are colors like a bright blue or orange, which makes them more prone to exposure. But one interesting thing about them is the three-head appendage, which includes their antennae, jaws, and the oral papillae. Their body is covered with tiny papillae arranged in bands, which is what gives them that like velvety like texture. Their eyes are pretty simple. They're located at the base of the antennae, but a cool fact is that the species that live in like dark places like caves don't actually have eyes because they just don't need them because it's dark. Okay, so what they eat? So velvet worms are carnivorous, and they usually come out like at night to hunt small insects, and their antennae is what actually helps them detect prey. And they use the oral papillae to squirt out like a sticky slime that traps the victim. So their slime is pretty cool. It's ejected under pressure and gets shoot up to 30 centimeters and becomes hard almost instantly. So what's more interesting is that the velvet worm can recycle it. So the velvet worm eats the victim, it reabsorbs the dry slime so it doesn't waste material. After immobilizing their prey, they use salivary enzymes to digest the prey externally by breaking down tissue, and then they suck up the liquefied food, very similar to like how spiders eat. So now, moving on with the reproduction. So the reproduction is very unique, just like their hunting. They have separate sexes, male and female. Males actually can transfer sperm directly or by attaching a spermatophore to the female skin. And then the female body actually dissolves her own skin at the spot, which allows the sperm then to enter her body. This is extremely unique and like rare reproductive strategy within like the whole animal kingdom. Okay, within the phylum of Onychophora, there's two families. The first one is the Peripathidae, which are mostly found in tropical regions and are Viviparous, which means that the embryo grows inside the mother's body. And then the other family is Peropatocete, which is more common in temperate regions, and is oviviparous, which means that they lay eggs.
So to continue with the growth of the onychophorans, when it comes to their embryonic development, they actually have no larval stage. And the juveniles are basically mini versions of the adults. So if you were to see a juvenile and an adult velvet worm, you would be able to recognize them both as velvet worms, just with some physical size differences. So their body is also covered in chitin. Unlike some of the other organisms and animals that we've seen, it's a soft chitinous cuticle rather than hard like a shell. It's thin and it's flexible, and it's also annulated with plicae, which gives them that velvet look. And they grow through a process of molting, of course, because they have this chitin cuticle, so they grow incrementally and not continuously. So the coelom formation of velvet worms is actually a bit atypical from what we've seen, and they have what is referred to as a mixocele. So the coelomic cavities basically fuse with the body cavity. The mesoderm during embryogenesis splits or separates, and it mixes with the coelom linings that have turned into mesenchymal tissues, which is basically just the tissue that makes up the mesoderm. So this creates this sort of mix of primary and secondary body cavities. So in adults, these segmented coeloms are actually reduced as time goes on. And so we have this mixed coelom. So one of the two families in the Onychophoran phylum is the Peripatidae, and there's only about 74 species of these velvet worms, and these ones are large, so they can grow up to be around 15 centimeters long, and that means that they have more pairs of legs than the other family will see, so anywhere from 19 to 43 pairs, and they're found in more tropical climates. So one of the biggest differences between these velvet worms is that in this family specifically, they are viviparous, which means that they develop the embryo of their children, the females, in their body and give live birth. And we'll see that differs in the other family. So they are this brown, reddish color, and their genital opening is between the penultimate pair, the pair before the last, and they have a diastema on the inner blades of their jaw. So the second family that we know of in this phylum is the Peripatopsidae family. There's about 109 species in this family, and they are smaller in size than the Peripatidae species, which means they have a smaller number of legs, about 13 to 29 pairs of legs on these worms, and they're also found in the temperate regions of the southern hemisphere. So visually, they have a gray-blue coloring, and their genital opening is actually located in a different spot. It's located between the last pair of legs. They also completely lack a diastema on the inner blades of the jaw. So their reproductive system is also greatly varied from the other family. They are oviparous, which means that they do not give live birth, and the embryo actually develops outside of the female's body. This basically means that the female will lay some sort of egg, and the embryo will, of course, not develop in the body, but outside of the body and hatch. So when it comes to the locomotion of this phylum, these velvet worms have segmented, unjointed, paired legs. In each of these sort of cylindrical legs, they have transverse pads and a claw or hook. So the claws are made out of hardened chitin, and they are actually retractable as well. So they are usually resting or walking on 3 to 6 pads on each foot. But depending on the terrain they're walking on, they will sometimes use or retract their hard chitin claws. And they control these legs through hydrostatic force and contraction of their muscles. So they basically use their muscles and their control of the liquid inside of their bodies to control their legs in a wave-like motion. And this happens from the anterior to the posterior, and this basically allows them to be able to move around. So question 1 is, what's the name of the head appendage used for grasping and cutting, which is the jaw? And the second is, what is the force used by Onychophora for locomotion, which is hydrostatic force?